Look in my eyes, what do you see? The Saudi show on DAZN TV. I know Frank's anger, I know his dreams. So why is it not on TNT? Oh, it is the cult of personality, although this is SO Live. Here with me, Danny Flexen and Ayman Khan. I'm very excited, as some viewers will know, because CM Punk made his glorious WWE return, his third return in 2 years, somehow, on Saturday night at Survivor Series. But I have to remind myself, this is a boxing podcast, not a wrestling one. More's the pity, some might say. But Ayman, how are you? How's everything going? Is that a fresh trim or some sort of trim?
It's nothing. It's a
No trim at all.
comb over the highest order. It is. I'm surprised by your bars, Danny. I'm surprised by the somewhat semblance of a tone in the singing there, Danny. It wasn't too bad actually.
The remastered Living Colour version as well.
I'm also pumped or punked for the CM Punk return. I'm also pumped or punked for big nights of boxing. I'm also pumped and punked for a big night of boxing that happened over this weekend as well. Looking forward to chop it up all with you in the chat. Get your comments in, get your questions in. Let's get into it.
Yeah, SO Live, we are the most interactive show on boxing YouTube, so please do give us a thumbs up. Thunder Road will be reminding you at sporadic intervals throughout on the live chat. Welcome to Thunder Road and all of you that have been with us. We know we started the countdown a bit early. Ideally to get your juices flowing, but I know there are a few little niggles, little complaints in the chat about that. But we're here now. We're all friends again. And we're going to be talking, first of all, about the somewhat surprising news, I think is what I called it in the description of the video, that the Day of Reckoning, which sounds like a WWE pay-per-view, in fairness, and is in Saudi, which again, there are parallels, will take place, or will be broadcast rather, on DAZN globally, not on TNT. We got the impression that Frank Warren, if there was a lead promoter here in the UK of that Saudi show, December 23rd, it was Frank Warren, but we haven't had a chance to catch up with him just yet. Ayman, I know you spoke to Eddie Hearn several times last week. You're like his new best mate. After the Katie Taylor win, which we're going to be talking about later on, you spoke to him again. You asked him about it being on DAZN. He said it was massive for DAZN. No mention of TNT. I'm assuming, will it be DAZN exclusively, do we think?
I'm not too sure. What was it announced in the statement? It said that there will be additional broadcasting coming or available or something of words to that effect as I jumbled them up a little bit. But the point being that there is more news to come on whether this is exclusive specific to the UK or not. I have the feeling with that little sentence there that was said in the statement that there is more to come, that this won't be an exclusive, that Eddie Hearn and DAZN have this on in the UK of their own accord. There might be Sky involved. TNT might still get a slice of the pie too. So much more developments to come. It's interesting because Eddie, who's somewhat often the silver-tongued man that he is, the charmer that he is often loose-lipped on these things, but he's kept tight shut with announcements and let the announcements happen from the Saudis' hand. So didn't give much away when I asked him beforehand, didn't give much away afterwards as well too. So developments to come as well. I would imagine that there is another broadcaster involved, but I don't think that's yet resolved as to who has those rights yet.
Yeah, I would have thought that if TNT were involved, they would have announced it at the same time as DAZN, or at least soon after. You might see in the chat, we've got a poll up already. We're going to be talking about this subject a lot more, so you might want to reserve your vote until you've heard, Ayman and I's arguments either way. But we're asking who is the most powerful promoter, boxing promoter in the UK, Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn, or who is the more powerful of the two, I think is how we worded it, for you diehard Ben Shalom fans out there. But yeah, Eddie Hearn versus Frank Warren, the eternal battle for boxing's heart and soul. Who is on top at the moment, if you can handle that image. Let's go to the chat. You've waited long enough. So let's see some of your comments. They're flying through. Someone said, nice Christmas jumper, Danny. I just saw. I'm not sure who that was. I'll give them their due credit when I come back to it. Let's go through some of your comments. Anthony Joshua versus Otto Valiant and Deontay Wilder versus Joe Parker and Big Baby soon, man. Yes, Andre Newby. We're looking forward to the show also. Oh, and then Andre Newby says, CM Punk, CM Punk. Yes, I love it. We may not be in Chicago, but it's in our hearts. Oh, it's Thunder Road. Nice for Danny to be already wearing his ugly Christmas jumper. I kid. Mate, I don't mind. I'll take it. I've got an actual. Oh, no, I had an actual Christmas jumper. It doesn't fit me anymore, unfortunately. It was Brudolph, and it had Rudolph chugging a beer, which I thought was pretty dadtastic. Raj Anwar says, as soon as the event's over, Warren and Hearn return to hammering each other. It's a very interesting point, Raj, because looking at recent interviews with both of them, they are, it's obvious, more complimentary about each other than they have been even over a few weeks ago. It's crazy. You know, there's no, they're not criticizing each other about stuff outside of December 23rd either. There does seem to be a temporary ceasefire, or, and it might be not right to use this in light-hearted context, but I've done it now, a humanitarian pause in hostilities between the two boxing promoters. Danny Boy taking inspiration from Frank Butcher with today's rig. Love it. Oh, you pair. That's my best Frank Butcher impression. Jason Gavin, if only it were a real one, I'd get starstruck, would say, would fans get double charged? Rest of card on BT, but AJ fight on DAZN. It said on the DAZN press release that Deontay Wilder against Joseph Parker is on DAZN as well. So I don't know if it'll be the whole card, but certainly those two fights will be on DAZN for $19.99, which I think is a very reasonable price if it includes the whole card. Mr. Khan looks like he's had a late night. That's Raj Anwar again. Yeah, I mean, they're all late nights for Ayman. We're working very hard here at Seconds Out.
Yeah.
That's on me. S. Clayton, the famous Simon Clayton, says Hearn by about 12 miles, referring to the poll, who is on top at the moment. Jack Dutton, could someone wake me up when this is actually starting, please? Jack, we're here, mate. Come on, don't troll. We're here. We're here for you. It's on, Jack. Press live, says S. Clayton. Thanks, Simon. Andre Newby talking about Punk against Cena 2011. Oh, that was one night stand. Was that? No, that wasn't one night stand, was it? Or was it? Ayman, do you remember? Was it one night stand? Ayman's gone.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it was SummerSlam, wasn't it?
Ah, yes. Well, no, he returned at SummerSlam. That wasn't when he won the title. Money in the Bank. It was Money in the Bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. One night stand was when Rob Van Dam beat John Cena the previous year, I think. Anyway, enough wrestling chat for now. Can't make any guarantees for further on. But yeah, Ayman, I was just saying in response to one of the comments, there does seem to be a bit of a ceasefire between Hearn and Warren while all this is going on. They're not caning each other about even subjects outside of December 23rd. And they did meet in person for the first time at a press conference that you were at. What do you make of it? And you know, do you think there is a temporary kind of, what's the word? A thaw in hostilities?
Yeah, definitely. I think they've downed tools on the back and forth for now, whilst there's a pretty penny to be earned for their fighters. And Hearn said as much as well, to the words of that effect, that they wouldn't be doing the best for their clients. The clients are their boxers. The clients are also their back pockets. If they don't take up this offer, if they don't down the tools in the back and forth and potentially scupper the opportunities that they have right now. So therefore, they met in a room for 5 minutes. George Warren orchestrated this meetup, shut doors. No one got to see anything. No one got to capture anything. They had this conversation. They talked a little bit about fights, and they said to themselves, let's not be idiots. Let's not let ourselves get in front of this. Let's not let the egos take over involved. So I can imagine here that they've had that conversation and they've decided that both of them, for now, maybe we'll see a return to form in the future of a bit of back and forth. But for now, whilst there's an opportunity to earn big fights, earn big paydays for their fighters too, they don't payday. They don't make sure that their words, their traded words, cost the trade for leather on the night. But also, you got to look at this as well. People complain about this, and myself as well too. All the promoter back and forth, whilst we might have been guilty in the past of things like that, isn't always the best for the sport. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. We can leave those conclusions for another day. But for now, it seems to be getting the fighters their opportunities.
I'll refer you to a recent Frank Warren interview by Radio Raheem that carried the title, Eddie Hearn is a shit shoveler. And just how many views that got, that people have still got a real appetite for the promoter back and forth. That is certainly the case. Stuart Maloney says, look at the shows week in, week out. Matchroom are on a different level. Jason Gavin says, both waiting for that Saudi contract to run out. And Andre Newby says, Sky Sports had good cards in 2020. Wow. Take that on the chin, Sky. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Frank Warren has spent, I don't know how many years now, but certainly in the last few when I've been interviewing him, slagging off the zone. He's called it the app. He's called it dead zone. He's criticised the viewing figures. He said it's an unsustainable business model. Obviously, referring to his own time at Box Nation, how they struggled at times to make that work, and ultimately, moved to TNT or BT as it was then. So, how can you marry the two? And it's a question I'll be asking Warren if I get the chance to speak to him this week. Is how can you go from slagging off the zone and basically calling it a flawed model for years, and then putting your biggest card of the year, the biggest card of the year in boxing, onto that platform, even if it's in conjunction with TNT? Why would you see the benefit of it if previously you feel it's a dead model? So that's going to be an interesting one to bring up with Warren. I'm sure we'll have an answer for it by the time we speak. It'll be well briefed. But I think it's good to have as many eyes on it as possible if it is the zone in conjunction with other platforms. But I think if you're a TNT subscriber and you don't get the opportunity to see this, knowing that Frank Warren, who is the lead promoter on TNT, or the only promoter on TNT, is the, a key figure in this December 23rd Day of Reckoning show, and then you're already paying your subscription fee and you either have to pay extra to watch it on TNT pay-per-view or extra to watch it on DAZN, when you're already a subscriber and you've watched all the other Frank Warren events or Queensbury Promotions events, you'd probably be a bit miffed, I would say. And talking about the shows week in, week out, Matchroom have just coming off a good show in Dublin, although I would say the undercard wasn't particularly impressive. And since there's been a proliferation of TV promoters in the UK, I think the undercards all round have suffered as a result. So I'm not sure the gap is quite as big as some of the comments would make out. But in fairness, some of the Frank Warren kind of Friday night shows at York Hall and the Next Gen, or whatever their version of Next Gen is called, they haven't been amazing. But some of the big events have still pretty much delivered. You look at the two Joe Joyce, Yilei Zhang headline shows. I thought they were both very good. So I think it's a mixed bag with both promoters. But it is interesting that it looked like Frank Warren was kind of the key UK figure in a show on December 23rd in Saudi, which apparently involves 12 different promoters in total. But then it's going to the broadcaster most commonly associated with Eddie Hearn. I think there's still a lot of detail to come out.
I mean, let's look a little bit wider, though. Maybe it's a play for now for the point of we don't know the situation with the undisputed heavyweight fight. Who's going to be broadcasting that? Is that, you'd think that, look, it's Fury and Usyk, and that would land on TNT Sports pay-per-view. But with the Saudis controlling who gets what and paying for what they want, they, I believe, would have the control as to who gets to broadcast this. So is a pretty penny being saved right now for this fight in lieu of what's going to happen next year so they can push towards landing that on TNT Sports? I don't know. Again, I'm kind of playing around with everything here, playing with the money, so to speak. But look, you're right. I mean, shows wise and things, Frank Warren's stable has kind of been a bit of a lull over the few years as he built his prospects into positions now, and he's starting to bear the fruit of those with bigger fights down the line. And Eddie Hearn's kind of maybe seen as being usurped, especially here in the UK, by a lot of people, especially some of the hardcore fans. But Eddie Hearn kind of considers himself as a worldwide promoter. Maybe Frank will have a claim to that too as well, now that he's breaching into worldwide as well. But look, I asked this to Eddie at the press conference, and I said to him, look, a little bit of bruised ego potentially here. That look, you had that meeting with Frank Warren, you had that press conference with Frank Warren, and maybe as a competitor, you'd want that to happen under the circumstances of you leading the press conference and not Frank Warren leading the press conference. And Eddie said, and this is the bottom line here, Stone Cold would say so, bringing back the wrestling references. When there's money involved, when there's a pound note involved, it doesn't matter to him or probably Frank either who's leading, as long as they're getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think he kept saying about how him and AJ had come into the December 23rd card quite late on as well, as kind of a reason or mitigation why he didn't play a more prominent role. I know AJ would have liked Eddie Hearn to play a more prominent role at the press conference, as Dev Sani found out, much to his chagrin. The big right hand says, will SecondsOut be revealing the outcome of this poll to Hearn and Warren just to stir the pot? Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we? So Eddie Hearn's 70% at the moment. He'll love it. he loves Ayman at the moment. So if Ayman reveals that sort of news to him, it will just solidify their bond. Whereas Frank Warren will probably, I don't know, physically attack me or something when I reveal that. But we'll get a few do me a favors and a few shoulder rolls, no doubt. Andre Newby says, I want AJ versus Tyson Fury, man. Yeah, I mean, we'd all quite like that to happen, but I feel like they should have struck while the iron was hot. And now we could wait and either of them could suffer high-profile defeats and we'll lose that fight forever. But there's another argument it will always be there as well because of how much money is on the table. Raj says, I think DAZN wins more than TNT Sports in this arrangement. Also, Fury is not on DAZN, even though he's bigger in America. Jason Gavin, Frank was slagging off women's boxing and just now signed Hannah Rankin, who's everything Frank hated about the sport. White collar talent winning unified belts. I don't think that Hannah Rankin is the first former white collar fighter that's been in Frank Warren's stable for a start. And I think he signed other females before Hannah Rankin, Nicola Adams being most prominent, but even in recent times there was Raven Chapman before Hannah Rankin. So I think his views, whether his intrinsic views have started to evolve or just the fact that he recognizes there's some money in it or that it's a good look. Either way, those kind of cogs have been turning for quite some time. Andre Newby reminds us that Jake Paul is out soon. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about him in next week's episode. Jason Gavin, in terms of competitiveness, who has closer cards? I'd say probably probably Hearn, but then you'd have to say Sky Sports undercards generally have an English title fight or similar, or a British title fight on the undercard, plus some other ones that are quite close. You look at Joe Laws against Hennessy Jr. recently on a Sky card, for example. Jack Dutton says, do you think there are any rumours that now Showtime are leaving boxing, that PBC might be moving over to DAZN? There's certainly rumours. How credible those rumours are, I'm not sure. I was speaking to Raul Marquez recently. I was interviewing his son, Gio. And Raul was saying there has been lots of talks behind the scenes about PBC going to different platforms because he's hoping to get picked up and renewed as a commentator, whoever PBC ends up with. But yeah, I mean, that would be a real game changed for DAZN. It would give them that foothold in the US market that maybe Matchroom haven't quite provided just yet. S. Clayton says, Danny the ventriloquist. Thanks for that, mate. Mark Bray says, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank his turkeyness. Yeah, we wouldn't be doing this podcast without his excellency, Turkey Al Sheikh. But yeah, he's become the new Al Heyman, or the new God, if you look back at like Oscar ceremonies of the past and stuff. I'm not comparing him to God. I'm just saying he gets referenced and credited like the Lord Almighty. Raj says, Sky are not really using the bags on their platform. A few cancelled big fights are Cody not looking a good signing. Yeah, is there a Sky Sports curse or a boxer curse? It seems like they get these kind of big signings in and a few fights later they lose. You look at Okoli, Joshua Buatsi, obviously there was the injury to Dan Aziz, didn't really help him after joining. Liam Smith, of course, losing to Eubank in the rematch. I hope there's not a curse. Don't really believe in curses. Andre Newby talking about Otto Vallin versus Jake Paul. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you need to put the pipe down, as they say. Thunder Road says, I think PBC will end up with Amazon Prime. I mean, that'd be huge, wouldn't it? If any boxing promoter ends up with Prime or Netflix or someone of that nature, because it will expose the boxing industry and the shows and the fights to a whole different type of audience. The marketing potential would be enormous. More so, in my view, than the YouTuber fights, which everyone always talks about, exposes boxing to this massive audience. Imagine boxing gets a foothold in a good time slot as well, if it's going to be live on a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or an Apple TV. That would be amazing. Ayman, what do you think about the current status quo? And bear in mind, you've got to interview these guys, of course, on the front line, as I have, so it's awkward. But what do you think about who's providing the best content or the most competitive content in recent times out of the UK promoters?
Yeah, it's all a bit of a mixed bag, really. No, I wouldn't say there's any consistent, specifically leader with any promoter, to be honest with you. Like I mentioned here earlier, Frank's been on a bit of a rise with his prospects now coming into the 10s, 11s, 12s and points where they have to be chucked in, like Nathan Heaney over the past weekend, where it was sink or swim with him. Eddie Hearn's now kind of taken a route where now he's sort of throwing his prospects in as well, and sometimes earlier than they should do. Take, for example, Akib Fiaz, sink or swim with Reece Bellotti. maybe could have had a few fights if this was a few years earlier before he got to that point. Or Cyrus Patterson as well, for example, who had a real bruiser or a fight beforehand, got through the win, I think it was against Chris Jenkins, and had his next fight, and it wasn't a real good affair for him. So, but it makes for an exciting fight, makes for an exciting or memorable fight as well. So I think really there are holes you can pick really with each individual promoter, and really that's kind of how you have to look at it. At least how I look at it anyway, that whilst they're in competition with each other, sometimes it isn't as easy to compare the promoters with each other. I kind of find that for me, overall, the best cards, or at least well-matched cards, are Golden Boy cards. I quite like the way that their fighters are matched in competitive fights across the board. Really, we'll see the fruitions of that. And I think it's Ryan Garcia, Oscar Duarte this weekend. So I quite like Golden Boy cards on the whole, and Top Rank cards are pretty good too. But there have been I mean, this weekend I was there for Cameron versus Taylor 2, and like you mentioned there, that maybe the undercard wasn't packed with the best of names or on paper the best of fights, but it delivered. Like across the fights of the undercard, I was there early. I watched Emmett Brennan in a real good fight there. I saw Thomas Carty versus Garber wasn't the best of fights, but that was a heavyweight affair where you got a young heavyweight trying to play his trade, so you're not going to get the best of affairs sometimes. But Gary Cullen versus Reece Mold was intriguing as it last because of the vulnerabilities of Gary Cullen in his last fight against Jose Felix, and because Reece Mold can really hit at that level too. So there was intrigue in that fight as well. And then obviously Chantelle Cameron versus Katie Taylor delivered. So, and then rewind again, like I mentioned about. You had Nick Ball and Isaac Dogbe with a rise in Nick Ball, even though maybe it wasn't planned to be that way. Nathan Heaney winning a British title when he maybe shouldn't, for a lot of people, saying he was going to get walked through. Denzel Bentley didn't provide a night, but Heaney did. So those moments have been provided across the board by all promoters as well. So and Boxer as well. Sorry, I should mention Boxer as well too, just to make sure everyone's satisfied. Real good night at Wolverhampton. Real great cracking atmosphere. And now 2 European champions. Adam Azim has been matched very well. Tyler Denny again from out of nowhere was once a plumber and not a toilet cleaner, as was suggested. Got to be proud of the work that they've done as well too with those two fighters. So I think there's a lot to like right now with British boxing, when sometimes we do poo-poo it a little bit too much. But I'm really kind of waiting for one to really put themselves head and shoulders above the rest.
I love the way you went from toilet cleaner to sometimes we poo-poo it. That was seamless.
There you go.
Deontay Wilder versus Joe Joyce will never happen, says Andre Newby. You're quite right. I can see the intrigue in that, though. It's like the irresistible force against the immovable object, although we have seen Joe Joyce stopped twice recently, haven't we? Raj Anwar wants to see Coogan against me. Hey, if it's a boxing match, more than happy to do it. I've said this before. If the money's right, talk to my agent. Have your people call my people. More than happy to get in there for a bit of a spar. Not a roll around, not a cold frotch, push and pull roll around, but on the cobbles and all that. But yeah, wouldn't mind getting in the ring. Our poll has closed. Eddie Hearn takes it with a whopping 74% of the vote as who is the more powerful promoter currently between the two. Frank Warren, I can feel his shoulder rolling from here. He will be absolutely seething at this, but he still won't hate us as much as he hates boxing news. Jack Dutton says, with Fury Usyk, could one possible scenario be that Fury beats Usyk, gets stripped by the IBF, AJ fights Hrgovic for the vacant title, wins, then fights Fury for all the belts in late 24 at Wembley? There's so many ifs and buts there, but I think the main part is that Fury would have to go into a rematch with Usyk, and I believe there is a rematch clause, should he beat Usyk the first time. And if he then enters into a rematch with Usyk, the IBF would strip Fury of their belt, and then the top two contenders would have to fight for that. AJ, if he's beaten Valin, there you go, another if, would fight Hrgovic for the title, and then he'd have to beat Hrgovic as well, and then fight Fury for all the belts. I mean, yeah, too many ifs there for me. I don't know if I see AJ getting past both Valin and Hrgovic. It's a bit of a gauntlet to run, but then Fury would also have to beat Usyk twice. So let's wait and see where we go with all of that. But it's certainly interesting to fantasize about future fights. Jason Gavin says, Alicia Baumgardner releasing results of her own PED investigation. Should fans be entitled to transparency if we're expected to continue buying ticket PPVs? Yeah, I mean, in a sense, But yeah, I mean, how seriously can you take it with so many months later after the original thing that happened? I don't know if we can say that she's quote unquote innocent. Certainly, she believes she is. But yeah, I think the jury's still out on that one. The boxing guru, my old friend, he's finally back. I can't wait to see the positive things he's got to say about me. Has any boxing fan ever thought to themselves, I wonder what Danny Flexen thinks about this issue? I think they have, mate. It's like WWDD. What would Danny do?
Is this Tommy Allen?
I don't know. He's the one who always slags me off, so probably. But yeah, let's. As long as he keeps it clean, we won't ban him. I think that's fair. It's like Nigel Farage in the jungle, isn't he? You know, entertaining but mostly unwelcome. But yeah, appreciate you as always, boxing guru. So we've talked about Hearn versus Warren. I think, you know, the fans certainly think that who's the boss has been answered with a resounding Eddie Hearn, 74%. Simon Clayton sticking up for me once again says he has thought, what does Danny Flexen think about the issue? Thanks, Sire. Kelly Crosby, does AJ versus Deontay happen next year or will AJ target a belt? Eddie Hearn most recently says he wants it to happen in March. So we shall wait and see how that unfolds. They certainly both seem up for it. Jack Dutton, I've also heard a rumor that the possible Crawford-Spence rematch could be on pay-per-view on Netflix. Do you think there's any truth to that? I mean, I don't know if they'd make much money out of it. I think the victory in the first fight was so conclusive, and they've also left it quite a long time since. I'm not sure how much appetite there is for that rematch, to be completely honest. Raj Anwar, I'm going to save your comment for a minute, Raj, because it's about our next subject that we're moving on to now. We'll change the headline up on screen as well. Ayman was there in Dublin, an amazing redemptive victory, rematch victory for Katie Taylor, regaining the undisputed lightweight championships from Chantelle Cameron for a raucous crowd. Now there's talk of Croke Park for a trilogy fight or even that long-awaited rematch with Amanda Serrano. But Katie Taylor back on top. Few people predicted it, but everyone in Ireland seemed very happy after the result. Ayman, what was it like being there? And at what point in the fight did you realise that Katie Taylor was most likely going to pull this off?
So, to be fair, like it was a little bit of an up and down week with what was going on in the city because of other reasons that we won't go into discussion for now. But just to give you some context with what was going on, that maybe the city needed a bit of a positive spotlight, a positive beacon for something good, and that's always been Katie Taylor. And Katie's been the one in this situation against the odds here to come up strong and get the victory. There was a feeling that maybe there wasn't the same buzz this time round as there was the first time round, and that's natural. That's natural because the first time round was a homecoming. The second time round she's coming off of a defeat where people saw a very strong Chantelle Cameron, and we've seen Katie in the past where it seems like after the fourth or fifth round she looks like she's gassed and she has a level of resolve, a level of fortitude to get through to the 10th and final. And she's always been that way, and she always does that. But when you mirror that on the opposite corner with Chantelle Cameron, who looks strong, who looks like she wants to knock you out, then it's an even stronger image of the boxing demise of Katie Taylor, which was being written. The obit was being written by a lot of people, and myself being someone who very much doubted Katie's chances here to get the victory over Chantelle, not because she's not a great fighter, not because she couldn't, but because of the strengths of Chantelle and because of what Chantelle did the first time round. So to see Katie come in, to see Katie have the confidence, to see Katie say, look, I need to park a lot of things to the side. I need to concentrate solely and focus on the fighting, and to see her execute a game plan which included shorter flurries, shorter bursts of action, really kind of leading in with her flurries and then holding and clinching and implementing with that, with that lax referee who was letting her get away with those. Some other referees maybe would have deducted a point or at least warned, which would have deterred Katie from using that tactic, but she was able to use it to her advantage in the fight. There were headbutts. I wouldn't call Katie an intentionally dirty fighter like that, but those were happening on both sides, and that led to her advantage in the fight with Chantelle Cameron having a cut which looked pretty bad. It might have affected the fight in terms of her vision, but I think what really got Katie the win was her game plan. She was able to notice that she needed to be out of range quickly with short flurries, then move, then hold, then clinch, then waste a little bit of time, whatever it was, and get out of the way and utilize that on a recurrent basis, because Chantelle didn't really deviate much. She just marauded forward as a fighter that maybe knew that the end was coming or had the idea that the end would come for Katie sooner or inside the distance. A couple of contentious points outside, or one contentious point outside of the headbutts and the holding, that being whether it was a knockdown or not. I usually go off my eyes and what I see. And for me, it looked like a knockdown. But when you're sitting, when you're looking, you're on a point of view where you're below the ring. So I couldn't see the feet positioning and whether there was a foot being held upon by Chantelle or the other way around. So I saw it as a knockdown initially, but it wasn't scored. And then when I've looked back at it as well, it's still inconclusive as to whether it was a knockdown. So it's hard to kind of say. You really kind of have to go on what the referee went with here, whether the other parts of his performance was bad or not. And I had it kind of very close up until the final round. And I thought Katie edged it. I thought it was 96-94. I thought Katie Taylor deserved the nod on this night, having not watched it back either. But I thought she warranted the win just by the slimmest of margins. And credit to her for what was just a brilliant performance. And it really builds to the third fight. That makes the most sense. I know Amanda Serrano is in the wings. She's waiting as well for a big fight, but they can do that again. But she really deserves for me that 8,000 Croke Park fight night against Chantelle Cameron in a trilogy fight where she can call the curtain on a career, whatever the result is.
So just on that knockdown, Raj Anwar again says, what should be done with the judging at boxing matches to make them more fair? Taylor was knocked down Saturday. That would have affected the result. Yeah, so if the knockdown had been called from my kind of quick back of a fag packet maths, I think it would have been a split draw because it would have made the 96-94 a drawn card and the drawn card going in favour of Chantelle Cameron. So it would have been a split draw overall. And it did look like a knockdown to me on replays, watching on TV. But yeah, I mean, I've seen softer knockdowns than that given as well. But we should note that if a ringside judge believes a knockdown has occurred, he doesn't have to rely on the referee to call it, to include it in his scores. If he thinks or she thinks there's a knockdown, you can make that a 10-8 round. You don't have to be guided by the referee. It's just become usual protocol that you are guided by the referee, but there's nothing in the rules to say it has to be that way. Phil Harve says, old school Frank Warren is the king. S. Clayton says, feel a little for Cameron as with the knockdown in the first, she would have won. However, I feel Taylor edged it. I don't think she would have won. I think it would have been a split draw because wasn't the card in Katie's favour like 98-92? So there was no coming back from that card regardless. And I think 96-94 only becomes 95-95 with a switch from a 10-9 round for Taylor to a 10-8 round to Cameron. But I'd have to double check. I could be wrong about that. Raj says, while it was not a shocking decision, we've had those over the years. We really need to make it fairer across the board, over the pond. And Taylor Catterall comes to mind. Yeah, very good point. But what do you do? How do you do it? Do you employ full-time officials? Train them properly? Make sure that they're not paid by the promoters or they get their expenses rather from the promoters? Yeah, in theory, or have a video judge as one of the three or an extra one. There's lots of things you can do, but they all cost money. And the British Boxing Board of Control aren't known for having a huge amount of money. So let's wait and see how that works. It's something the NFL have battled with for a number of years, and they've now got video review and someone external who looks at videotape of contentious calls. But there's still not a Sky judge, if you like, who reviews everything in real time. They don't have full-time officials either who earn a decent amount of money. So they're still struggling with it, and they've got a lot more dispensable income than the Board of Control. So I don't see a solution necessarily to this problem anytime soon. Jason Gavin says, refs need to be on clinching a lot more in women's boxing due to 2-minute rounds, can easily kill half of the round by clinching the opponent. Yeah, I mean, Taylor's coming for a lot of criticism about clinching in the fight, particularly in the later rounds. But if the referee's not getting stronger on it, as you allude to there, then she can't be blamed for smart tactics. Thunder Road says, 60 watching, let's hit the thumbs up. Thanks, Thunder Road. It actually works, Thunder Road's prompts, because as soon as I saw it, I thumbs upped it myself. Jim McDonald boxing. Good to see you, Jim. Catch yourself on and all of that, Stephen. But he's retracted his 2 messages, so we'll wait and see what he's got to say. S. Clayton says, you take 2 points for Taylor and give Cameron 1 point, so 95-94. Oh, well, there you go then. So, yeah. So it would have been a Cameron victory in that case. Jason Gavin, would a half-point system work? So winning a round decisively is worth more than scraping through one. Yeah, I've seen that as well. More use of the 10-point must system. So, you know, a 10-8 is a dominant round. With a knockdown, then becomes 10-7 and so on. I think it's worth looking at. I know in the old days, the British Boxing Board of Control, when it was referee was the sole arbiter, there used to be a lot of half-point victories in those fights. But I don't know if that resulted in less complaints. I guess less people were watching the fights on TV. So perhaps there wasn't as much of an outcry. Oh, here's Jim McDonald boxing. Women's boxing is poor, always has been, always will be. So it will. So it will. Thanks, Jim McDonald. Hope Andy, Steve, and the rest of the family are doing well. Liz, we miss Liz back in Weatherfield. Jack Dutton says Katie should be rematching Serrano because I think Katie lost that fight. Draw at the very most. I'd like to see Taylor Serrano too, personally. I think Katie's overrated. Do slap my wrist. Well, we will metaphorically slap your wrist because she's coming on arguably the best victory of her long and storied career. So it's a bit churlish to say she's overrated at this point, I think. Raj says, I think your solution's welcome, Danny. Leaves more issues as the points given would... Sorry, it's covered by the heart emoji. So just give me a sec. Would not agree with the referee. But is that a problem necessarily? I'm not sure it is. I think the judges are there to judge the fight, regardless what the referee says. Otherwise, every referee error, the judges would be obligated to compound their error by agreeing with it. I'm not sure that's a way forward either. But yeah, so we've talked about this for not long enough necessarily, but we do have another subject to get to before we round off this week's episode. And we're back to Ireland next week, or certainly Ayman is, going out to Belfast to see the return of Mick Conlan. Ayman, when do you fly out and how excited are you about return to the Emerald Isle?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good stay in Belfast, and I'm looking forward to an even better stay in... good stay.
The wrong way round.
Yeah, getting my islands wrong. Good stay.
Taylor's not British. Just
yeah. Good stay in Dublin. And cards wise, people were saying, look, maybe the card wasn't the best in Dublin, but this is a real good card in Belfast. And I tend to agree. There's some real good fights on that card.
Yeah,
with
in terms of depth, certainly.
For sure. I mean, starting off at the top with Michael Conlan and Jordan Gill, look, Michael's made a change now to bring in Pedro Diaz after his defeat to Lopez. And a lot of people were saying in the industry, look, Lopez is tailor-made for Conlan. He should pick up the title in that fight. And I didn't have that same opinion on it. I thought that was a real tough fight for Michael, especially off the back of the Lee Wood ending. And it turned out that way when Michael was on the end again of another hard knockout. And it was a bit confusing as to the way he fought that fight, really kind of going for the kill instead of boxing. And the question there stands if Michael's still got that ability to do that. Was it just a game plan sort of thing? And will he elect to do that against Jordan Gill? And Jordan's look, he's been at a level and he's not been able to push himself further than that level, but he's a good boxer himself as well, and can crack as well. He's shown that if you back him into the corner, he will fight, and he's got something in the locker that you have to be worried about. That can put your lights out. It's called the thrill. Hasn't showed that throughout his career, but in that one fight, he did do. And that's something that Conlan, with his vulnerability that he's shown, he'll have to be very wary of. Now, I feel that Michael, if he's got anything left and has real title aspirations, then he should come through Jordan Gill and potentially stop Jordan Gill. But that remains to be seen on the night. A real good fight against Tyrone McKenna and Lewis Crocker. Tyrone is in his element when it comes to being in Belfast, always entertaining in the ring too. Went up to world level against Regis Prograis and has to come back down now. Lewis Crocker undefeated. He will be looking for an opportunity as well too to real prove himself as well. A lot of talk about Crocker on the scene. We'll see if he can come through the experience of McKenna. Agarko versus Williamson is a very, very good fight. Agarko, I think, was given a bit of stick from Eddie Hearn specifically for being a fighter who was turning down opportunities and turning down fights and wanting tune-ups, and whether that was the case or not. He's now against Troy Williamson, who will bring the fire from the off. Troy's someone who's got good boxing ability as well, but more likes to throw with you. And Agarko will have to be wary of that as well, and might find himself on the end of something big if he doesn't box well in that fight. So Sean McCoomon, Sam Maxwell, another good fight as well. Maxwell, look, he's again another fighter who's been at a level. but has taken some heavy shots, heavy fight in tough fights. Can he come through Sean McCoon, who's again always in good fights too? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the fight. I'll be over there on Wednesday. Looking forward to that. I should be reuniting with Steve Wellings too, hopefully on Fight Night as well. So I'm looking forward to this card for multiple reasons.
SW Boxing. Where is he? Where is he on this fine Monday evening? But yeah, that'll be good. Go and stay at his farmhouse. It's good enough for me. It'll be good enough for you. You can meet the GOAT. Although, did he say the GOAT had gone? I can't remember. Troy Williamson against Kevin Ajako. Is that a super welter or at middle?
I think it's a super welter.
That's tough for Troy Williamson to get back down to that weight again, I would think. You know, I mean, he seemed to be struggling in the build-up to the defeat against Josh Kelly to make that weight. And then he's lingered around it because obviously that's where the big money fights and the opportunities are. But I don't know. I mean, he's very tall for the weight. He always looks quite filled out as well. I don't know. He's getting on a bit as well. Like, he's not old, of course, and he's fresh, but I think he's past 30. I'm just checking on BoxRec now in case I've got that wrong. Yeah, he's 32. I mean, it's tough. He's a spring chicken compared to me, of course, but, I'm nowhere near 11 stone or 11 stone 6. I'm not worried. So that's an interesting element to it as well. I kind of favour Ajako primarily for that reason. But it's time for Ajako, and I mean this with all due respect. I really like Kevin, but it's time for him to start fulfilling his potential. He's an incredible amateur, and we've all been told how talented he is by various trainers that he's worked with over the years. Now's the time to really step up and prove it rather than just, everyone around him saying it. I'm sure the talent's there in the gym, so let's see it in a competitive fight or what looks a competitive fight on paper. You want Ajako to go in there, ideally for his career, and make it not look competitive in the slightest. Similar to Conlan, I suppose, with Gill. And I know they've sparred in the past, and maybe there's some clues there into how the fight will go on Saturday night. But Jordan Gill's got nothing to lose in this fight, particularly. Conlan's fought at world level, challenged for the world title a couple of times, was, seconds away from winning it against Lee Wood before getting knocked through the ring ropes. And incredible talent. And again, another really, really good amateur, Mick Conlan. Still, before the Lopez fight, still looked like he was performing at a very high level. Jordan Gill goes into this, won't be expected to win, and could spring the upset if he's got the self-belief. He's got a good training team around him. He's technically solid, can dig a bit as well. If he believes in himself, then he's got a chance of pulling off the upset. But I think it is that self-belief that's going to dictate whether he gets the job done or not, and also how well Conlan performs, how much Conlan's got left. Because if Conlan's the fighter that we saw push Lee Wood all the way and almost win the title, then it's very hard to give Gill much of a chance. But if Conlan slips a bit, Gill comes in with self-belief and ambition, they could meet in the middle kind of thing, and it could be a very, very good fight. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to Ajako Williamson probably the most of all the fights on that show. Tyrone McKenna, he's up against it against Lewis Crocker, who looks a very, very exciting talent, unbeaten welterweight, big for the weight as well. It's a difficult one, and no one's really talking about Lewis Crocker when they talk about the young welterweights coming through. You look at the likes of Conor Benn, Boots Ennis, and so on. I think Lewis Crocker gets the job done in style here. We know Tyrone McKenna is famously durable. If he gets the job done inside the distance, you might want to then start adding Lewis Crocker's name to the likes of those kind of next generation of welterweights. So we shall see. There was a question about Jarrell Miller that I think is a good one to end on because it's not connected to any of our subjects that we've got on our headlines. However, I thought it was a good question. I'm just trying to find it now. So Raj Anwar, who's been the star of the chat, I think, for this episode, says, what do you both think about Miller, Jarrell Big Baby Miller, being given a big payday on a big card after his drug use? And obviously that is a moral quandary, isn't it? So Ayman, starting with you, what's your take on him getting this big fight with Daniel Dubois at the Day of Reckoning, given his past, his checkered history?
Yeah, I mean, I remember interviewing Eddie Hearn years back, and it was around the time where Povetkin was coming in and being used as opponents and such. And Eddie said, it's very hard in the heavyweight division. You get to a point where pretty much everyone who's in a fight now has some sort of past, has some sort of history, has some sort of doubt about them. So it's hard to make fights, and you kind of have to draw the line somewhere as to where it is. And when Miller has had a past where he's been found out and he's been found out for multiple substances. He's been found out to that if you follow the science, I believe it is the case that these things can't slip into your system. These things can't go that way. You're either doing it or you're not, and though that's a pill you have to swallow, where you have to say either look, you hardline ban it, or you give people opportunities to reparate and give them forgiveness and hope they don't do it again. And that's the line that boxing has gone with for a while, for better or for worse.
But he's had more than one second
Yeah.
chance, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. And it's clear that boxing has gone the opportunity to give him another chance. I think what the WBA have sent him on a course of understanding. They did something over in another country, I believe it was in South or North America, where he had to do the card, and it was against like drugs in the sport, or whatever it was, that sort of thing. These sort of kind of random little bits there. But bottom line being, we hope that Jarrell Miller, doesn't elect to do the same thing again. And excuse me, the question is, as well on Frank Warren's side, like, are you not worried? That's what I asked Frank Warren. I said, are you not worried that you're putting in Dubois, who's coming off a defeat to Usyk, who people doubt Dubois mentally, people doubt Dubois that when it's put on him, can he sustain? Does he have the resolve himself to battle back? And Jarrell Miller is someone who throws a load of punches. If it's legitimately or not, we'll find out in this fight. He's someone who will get into your head before the fight. That's obviously above board there. Do you want to be putting a prospect who can do something at heavyweight in there with someone who has those doubts? And then Andy then followed on to that question and said, have you got someone to replace him if something does happen? He goes, well, no, you can replace him. Didn't really want to answer the question there. The thing going forward in this fight is there's VADA testing in this fight. Jarrell Miller will have to get over the finish line if he wants to be in this fight. Don't know. Answers I don't know. And with boxing, look, I'd rather see a fight. I think there is such a thing as second chances, definitely, but you can only roll that dice sometimes. You can only roll things sometimes, and if it's egregious, which Jarrell, it seems, has been egregious in the past, then bans of 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is, I think they need to be thrown around a lot more frequently than they are thrown around here. So it's a difficult situation, and it's one where it leaves a bit of a taste in your mouth in terms of seeing fights go forward. But the other side of the equation is, like, that press conference was exciting because Jarrell Miller brought that excitement there. And do you get that? Because that's the trade-off here. It's health over a bit of TV. I side on the health over the TV, but the TV is what gets you tuned in at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie's talked about that stuff, like you said, but he's also said the fight between AJ and Miller will never happen because of the drug use. So I don't know if it's a double standard, but it's certainly, there seems to be a line where the controversy and the risk isn't, let me rephrase, the fight itself isn't big enough to warrant the controversy and risk, I guess. You've got to look at who you back and who you don't. And I guess Miller's not Eddie's fighter for a start. And is an AJ versus Miller fight that big that it's worth incurring that amount of criticism and taking that amount of risk with your marquee name? It's not. But it is a commercial decision. I think we need better structure around drug use in boxing, and the fact that if you're guilty once, you get a severe ban, and if you're guilty any time after that, you're gone from the sport. But I think that's the issue. I don't think it's a case of promoters rewarding him with a big fight. They've got to make the fights that make the most sense to them. Jarrell Miller will have a price to bring in against Dubois. They'll judge it. They'll think whether Dubois is going to win the fight, how much money that fight will generate, and so on. And they'll make that decision on a purely commercial basis. I can't imagine much thought will have gone in at the Queensberry office about Jarrell Miller's past and how that will affect whether they should bring him in for Dubois or not. Maybe the press kind of core, or the press, Matt Rich obviously does the press stuff for Warren. You've got Dev Sani in that area as well. They might have talked about it and said, this might not be a good look. Do we really want to bring him in? But at the top level, when they're making that final decision, I don't think Frank Warren will be considering that as one of the factors. I think it is a purely commercial decision. I think all promoters will make their decisions based mostly on commercial aspects. And we shouldn't really criticize them for doing it. I think we should be criticizing the framework of boxing, the governance of boxing, for not giving lifetime bans for these guys when they fail more than one drug test or for PEDs. You know, Jarrell Miller seems like a nice guy on the surface. I've always, you know, been accessible and friendly when we've had the chance to interview him. But if you fail once and you don't appeal it, and, you know, there's no contention around the decision in the first place, that's a long ban, in my view, or it should be. And then if you do it again, once bitten, twice shy, you're out of sport for good. And I think we'd see a lot less people doing it once those penalties increase. I think the biggest problem we've got at the moment is that boxers will look at the leniency at the moment in the sport and think, well, it's worth the risk. If I don't get caught, I might win a really big fight and it's worth doing. And if I do get caught, I'll only be out for a couple of years. So, you know, they're making those sort of plus minus decisions in the same way promoters are commercially. They're making those decisions about their own career, and they're basing it on, you know, how likely they are to be caught and what punishment they'll get if they are caught. And it is a risk-reward equation. So that's the thing that needs to change, in my view. But I've been on my soapbox long enough. I'm going to step off it now and just say thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, the 27 likes is still on 27 after I added mine to the list. So Thunder Road's prompts maybe aren't as effective as I gave him credit for. So please do like it. If you're watching on playback, please add some comments below because you've obviously missed out on the live chat, although you will see the live chat replay. But I will see you all next week. Ayman, what are your closing remarks?
Yeah, look, exciting last week in boxing, being at the Katie Taylor. I've done it again, third time's charm. Chantelle Cameron versus Katie Taylor to fight. That was a real good night. Looking forward to a real good night in Belfast too. I'll be there for Seconds Out, keeping you abreast of all the information and getting you the interviews. So make sure you keep tuned in to Seconds Out for those videos coming. If you haven't already, click the like button and subscribe, as it does help us. We've got much more boxing content coming your way. And whether you're pumped or you're punked for boxing, we've got you up to date here. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.